And welcome back to AR Sales, aka the A.R.T. podcast. I am A.R. Minaban, and today I am joined again by the returning heavyweight champion of the world, coming back, prolific, has so much work out, so much art out, such a genuine artist. Always love talking to him. Such a helpful human being. And he has ventured into doing book reviews. Paul Williams, author in his own right, supernatural fantasy fiction. So much to talk about. Paul, how you doing?
Not bad. Definitely a little bit tired because it's the end of the holidays, but
Yeah, that's gonna be the mood for a good month and a half, honestly.
yep.
Yeah. But kind of in reference to the everything that you're doing, how are your writing ideas, projects coming along? Is there anything new to talk to the people about? And for anyone that is unaware, that hasn't listened to the first episode, and if you haven't, make sure to go ahead and do so. So many books out already. You need to hop on if you're not aware of this young talent. So worth it. I am telling you, hop on the Amazon page. Paul Williams is going to all be there. Make sure to follow him so you get notifications of new stuff coming on. But is there anything new on the pop lines that people should be excited for?
From last time, I'm in the beta reading process for my newest book, the first in this fantasy trilogy. It's just about done. I might get an editor soon, get the cover done, interior, all that. Aside from that, that's the biggest project that's going on right now.
Okay, and can you talk to us a little bit about that without getting into spoilers?
Yeah, it's like a Greek Roman inspired fantasy that's kind of based on like the beginnings of Christianity, and well, that's like a version of it, like a fantasy version of it. The kind of oppression and people fighting back against it and stuff like that.
That is very, very cool. So it's kind of like Spain's Crusades versus the Ottoman Empire type of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, very, very cool. Now, I am insanely interested in that type of topic, and I would love to write that type of fiction. So can you talk to us a little bit about more in depth how you're going to go about it? What type of characters are going to be doing? Like, are you going to be introducing? Are you going to reference historical terms, or is it going to be purely fantasy, purely fiction? How are you going to be treating the religions? Are you going to mention Christianity? Is it going to be another type of religion that they reference? I mean, there's so many religions that got completely washed out by Christianity. I mean, Zoroastrianism that got like completely, wiped out and replaced by like different versions of it just because of the silencing that the Crusades did. And plus all the native like idols that were worshipped in, Haiti and Dominican Republic and all these places that Spain and France and England went to go conquer. The Crusades wiped all that out too. So, I mean, the level of reference point that you have in order to make not just an interesting story, but a dramatic story that people can put true emotions behind. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, well, from what I know, I think Zoroastrianism was kind of like absorbed into Christianity as a part of it, from what I learned. But going about writing this story took a lot of research. It's definitely epic fantasy, so it's separate from our reality, like in total. So I use like approximations and things to get the mythology and everything down in the characters. I took a lot of inspiration from the Mediterranean in general, in terms of the characters and all that. Even took inspirations from Asia, Hawaii. It's basically definitely like an all-around kind of story. I wanted to portray, how those societies were in a fantasy setting. So I wanted to go all out with the kind of cultures that I wanted to create.
So how do you plan on taking that mass of source material basically and making it into a plot line, creating an emotional through line that a reader can not only be interested in the world that you're building out, but also be invested in the characters that you're introducing?
Well, thankfully it's a trilogy, so I'm able to like stretch out the world bit and everything between the three books. But definitely I have a through line for the plot that's relatively simple because I have three point of view characters. They each, I have it mapped out in the plot, the story beats, this person does this in this chapter, this chapter, this chapter. And so kind of as I'm writing, I kind of like make up, what they're feeling and what's going on, but I know what's going to happen for each of them. And in the book, I know where I wanted to end, where I wanted to start, and how I'm getting there.
Now, one cool thing that you and I have in common is that you also have a visual aspect to your writing. So how does that coincide with how you create your worlds? Is it a visual thing that every time you get to a certain chapter, you just have a certain image in your head that you can't get out and you have to draw, you have to make it into a physical type of painting, picture, whatever it may be? Or is it more in reverse where you have an image that inspires what you write?
It's a little bit of both, actually. I don't incorporate the visuals into the book itself, but I do have, like, it's right beside me, like a binder full of notes and drawings that I did based on it.
Wow.
That's like the map out for this library that's in there.
Yeah, show some off if you don't mind. Yeah.
So it might be a little bit bright.
Yeah, for the people listening on that aren't on the YouTube, it's very, I mean, we're talking about like the type of notes that I would have to give to my senior year engineering class, so I would get maybe an A plus 100,000 on, because these are insane notes, beautiful, and those are handwritten, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that looks like it got printed out. It looks like a beautiful file. So I love that level of I don't know, I guess synergy between crafts, because writing is an art form, and just like anything else, is one of those things that not only is it a logical thing, that you also really have to have, it's emotional based as well, you know. So
really symbiotic.
Exactly. I just did another recording and I used the exact same word. And I felt so proud of myself that I came up with that word and I didn't stumble it. I was like, symbiotic. Look at that. 4 syllables, folks. That's when you know. Now, one of the things that I 100% want to keep on talking about is the whole idea of genres, because we actually did talk about this idea in this incubacy months ago. I think it was on a group cast that you mentioned the idea of this, and it was just, I think you had gotten the idea for it either that week or the week prior. So seeing your notes now in comparison, it's only been a couple months. I know it feels like it's been like 4 years since we talked. I mean, Jesus, but it's only been a couple months. So the first thing that popped into my head is, how do you go from A to B in such a short amount of time, and how has that felt building a world? What has been your main driving point?
Well, definitely me having to research. The research affects me, like going into those rabbit holes where you learn about how certain stuff works. Like I'm learning how banks formed originally, and that's kind of it's interesting, and it's helping me flesh out how this works, because this is like powerful banking family in my story. So you're talking about A to B in terms of the plot, or like the genre, or?
No, A to B, as in last time that we talked about this, we're literally talking about the idea of it, and now you just showed me a binder that looks like it's something that George R. Martin would have for the entirety of A Song of Wind and Fire, or Ice and Fire.
Ice and Fire, yeah.
Ice and Fire, yeah. That's how you know I'm a true fan. So that's the main thing that I'm curious about. It's like, how has it felt? I mean, I've mentioned it multiple times. It took me years to get to the level of world building that you seem to have. How is it building a world in 4, if that, months? And not only just the work behind it, but like truly, what is it that has inspired you to build this world? What is it that is like a driving point? Because I'm assuming at this point it's almost to the obsessive level where you wake up and you have an idea that can't get out of your head. Yeah.
Well, at that point, a few months ago, I had been building the world for like a year, since the start of 2020. And this binder was just like me cleaning it up and putting it all together. But I think the main thing is that it's fun. It's just really fun to do. And kind of making those interconnections with the story itself and the mythology and how it affects the characters and then the plot. It's just one of the things that I enjoy to read. So I really, really want to make sure I take the time to perfect it when I'm writing it.
Now, the reason I immediately smiled when I thought of that is because I feel that in my bones. I mean, when I originally got the idea for my book, I didn't even have it as an idea for a book. It was just an idea that I was obsessed with, exactly how you said. And I guess that to get kind of nerdy, it's the same reason why, I like puzzles, why I like math. It's because like it's a problem to solve. I think that's why it's exactly what you said, and no one has really ever said it in that way, which is why I like that. The way you termed that is, it really is like something to solve. You have all these puzzle pieces, you have an idea of what your world is, you have an idea of what your characters or what you want your characters to be, you know, the beginnings and the ending of like what it is that what your moral dilemma is, right? You have like the whole idea of the inception of Christianity. You're already talking about banks, so I'm assuming that you're also talking about how that rise in religion also created the basis of what we consider society now, right? So all those ideas, you have that in your head, but the true puzzle is how are these all going to fit together in a story? How are these going to, you know, what cool little aspects of stories that I've written, that I've loved in the past, can I now incorporate into these things? And more so, what haven't I seen in the past that I can do, that I can try to be nuanced with here?
Definitely. Yeah.
So with going off that idea, what are the things that you're kind of trying to make sure you get in the steps of? I mean, immediately when you talk about like Roman and Greek mythologies, first thing that pops into my mind is the Percy Jackson series. So, you know, what type of steps do you want to follow in the tradition of, and which ones do you want to deviate from? You know, those type of stories have a common staple point that they usually follow a male that is of fair skinning hair. So just even changing that type of character dynamic is a nuanced idea, especially when in reference to these type of stories.
Right. Well, the thing is, I wanted to break down our modern conception, or like the stereotypical conception of these cultures. And definitely historically, all the guys were not fair skin of hair and fair of skin and fair of hair. They were definitely like darker olive tone. You know, people came from all over the world into Rome. So that was definitely a basis for the characters that I had. And the one that I do have that is like the kind of white, you know, black hair, long hair, kind of typical Greek, what we would think of now kind of guy, is kind of more very morally gray. And he's kind of, I'm like twisting that narrative around a little bit. But in terms of like, again, going back to our modern ideas of how this culture was, I wanted to really show that it's not marble statues and like white columns. You know, they had a lot of color, they had a lot of life to them that we don't get to see today.
Now, that's an interesting concept because, especially with the Greek and Roman like stories, it's exactly what you said, that the whole idea of even a morally gray character is an interesting concept in these stories, because those stories are derived with the idea of you have this one character that's obviously good, and maybe he might have had like a troubled past, but it's always something that's redeemable due to like some fucked up emotion they had when they were a child. And then you have the villain who is obviously bad, and maybe if like the author is like a little has like a really cool like writing spin on it, they'll make it that you feel a little empathy towards it, but in the end goal, it's very clearly good and very clearly bad. So just the inception of that type of character in that story arc is an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm. I when I had my beta readers read it recently, and they mentioned that the character that I was talking about was actually like very religious and very devoted to the religion. And like I said, it's comparing to the fall of Christianity, or like the rise of it. So this character was like fighting against this oppression, but like in like ruthless ways that might have been like a little bit questionable.
Ooh. And what I find the most interesting is that even though those type of mythologies romanticize that level of idea, if you actually look back in history, it was filled with morally great characters. I mean, the stabbing of Julius Caesar, et tu Brute. I mean, the level of drama behind that. You have Nero, who like still is like looked at as like, you know, he literally was the emperor that made the fire brigades, but also is like pretty sure that was starting the fires as well. I mean, like the level of, again, things that you can have as a reference point are just endless. How do you plan on incorporating that with your genre? You know, we've talked about before, you like supernatural, you like the idea of almost speculative fiction. Are you going to incorporate that? I mean, Rome is known for having like the idea of blood magic, especially because Egypt at the time was very prominent.
Right. And I have some cultures inspired by Egypt as well. But yeah, that's a good point. Definitely later on in the trilogy, a lot of the supernatural, surrealist stuff kind of comes in, because there's this order of monks in these mountains that do blood rituals and blood magic, and that's kind of where the title comes from. Omen, they're called omens, and they do these rituals. And at the end, I'm definitely getting like kind of trippy, like very in-depth character psychological vibes for this final book.
Okay. Now I like that you have everything plotted out. While there are a large amount of people, I still don't think that it's as common for authors to truly know how, like, 3 books ahead of time, like what they're going to be writing. How does that feel? Do you ever feel like there's especially being at the point that I'm in the same boat, where now that I finished my first book and like I've been in the reception for the first book, it's almost making me want to consider changing things that I thought were written in stone of like the books that follow, just because now I have reception and before I was just in an echo chamber with my own thoughts.
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly where it's going to go. I have like vague, formless kind of ideas on, especially the third book. I'm working on the second book right now, and there are definitely like plot holes that are kind of forming just a little bit. So it's definitely stressful trying to like iron those out while I'm getting through the first draft, and trying to like make sure the first book kind of leads up to it in different ways. Um, but yeah, definitely reader feedback is important in the earliest possible stages, so you can catch those, right when they occur.
Mm. So from where we last talked, where we last left off, compared to now, do you think there's anything that you've learned that has made the process a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more easy on your end, or does it still feel like you're grasping at straws? Because I know I feel that way sometimes, especially when it comes to marketing, getting your name out. I'll put like weeks of work into something that like goes all right, and then I'll do like 3 hours of work on something that like I have no idea, and that'll somehow be the most like effective marketing I've done in like a year and a half. So everything feels like I don't know what I'm doing.
In terms of marketing, I've definitely been going blind since I've started.
Yeah.
It definitely helps, I think, to put it in perspective that I'm just like one person. I'm not like a famous author with all these expectations, and I don't have a publishing company with all this money behind me. So I'm trying to set goals and ideas that are realistic for me as I am, about to go back into college, working a part-time job, trying to do my best to like establish a firm basis for, starting to really reach out into marketing before I think of, getting into the big leagues, like maybe the New York Times will do an article about me, And so I'm going to start with, I'm going to go show this to my friends in the self-publishing industry, I'm going to share this with them, get popular a little bit there, and we can help each other out.
Now that's something that I like. How have you felt starting up from like, making your first Instagram account to being now? How do you think the reception of the community has helped you?
It's helped me a lot. I think from what I've experienced, it's a very positive community. And, that's where I find my beta readers, alpha readers. That's where I find a lot of support. But I definitely think it's also a personal journey, because I made a post today about this. Sometimes you need to take a step back from Instagram and all the social media, because it can get very overwhelming very quickly. Especially if, you don't have that perspective and you're trying to get all these likes and all these comments, and it becomes numbers. And then that's when it gets stressful.
Oh, definitely. Especially when you start doing the comparison game to yourself, not even to other people, but like, oh, I made this post and I worked on it for X amount of time and it got this many hundred, and this thing that took a long time working on only got like a couple dozen. It's the most annoying thing ever. But what I'm trying to learn is it's a thing of consistency as much as content. So like I think just a simple fact that the most successful people that I've seen on this are the people that treat it like it's a job, and they're working for CNN, keep giving constant updates, constant little things, doing constant like audience interactions, sweepstakes, giveaways, things like that seem to really be driving more people. It's just like the type of society we live in now, where we have the ability to be able to talk to people at all times, and for whatever reason we want to use that. People want to know everything about you, every aspect of it. And in that sense, do you feel like the role of an author, not even just an author, but as a content creator, is being dwarfed from, instead of valuing the content, valuing the creative process, to valuing your personality?
Yeah, well, I mean, like in terms of even just calling it content, it's like, it's making it to be marketable to other people. But that's not what I like to do in general. I write because it's important to me, not to sell it and package it to other people through social media. Like, I don't want to get popular for the sake of being popular, just for who I am. Like I wouldn't have any interest in social media if it weren't for my work.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my train of thought.
Oh, we'll catch it. We'll catch the next one. But I think the biggest like lesson to learn from all that is basically that sometimes you have to step away and look at the larger picture, right? Because you some of the most successful people I've seen on just like the writing community are people that make posts that are helping other authors, which I always think is like really the most interesting thing ever. Because like instead of kind of like not to say that they don't do like the actual writing work, but it's like the entire marketing that they do is marketing for marketing, which is crazy to me, right? It's like their posts are helping you how to like market, but that in itself is the marketing of that person. It's the most interesting thing, like way of like delivering content I've ever seen. And what's crazier is that like maybe it's a generational thing, but like I get so surprised that gets more hits than like most things. A lot of book reviewers that I've seen have significantly higher followers than the authors that they're reviewing. Isn't that interesting?
I've seen like a quote somewhere that was like, good leaders make other people feel important, or like they're leaders, or like they're in charge. So I think that's what a lot of them are doing with that technique, is like centering other people in their approach to getting their own work out there is definitely like what draws you to them. Because like you're not going to click on something because it's important for somebody else, like what do I have to do with that? But if they're centering you and they're like, here's how you can do this, this and that, you're going to be like, oh, this helps me, so I'm going to like latch onto this a little bit more.
Now that's interesting. Now, knowing that, and because you have like such a kind of a firm grasp of like how that like ideology works, do you think that's something that you want to integrate, or is it one of those things that you would rather kind of stick to your guns as an artist and just be like, listen, that's not how I want to make my ends meet. I'd rather scrape on this for like years if it so be it, as long as it's done my way? Or is it one of those things that you think that it's just the industry? It's like a rapper saying that he doesn't want to go on SoundCloud. It's like, listen, you're not going to go far if you're not doing that.
Yeah, well, I do that. I will more in the past, but I'm trying to do it more recently. But I do have those author interviews that I do. Sorry, I'm holding a ruler. I do author interviews, platforming other authors, and I do
you hit advice. People with a ruler during the interview?
No, no.
Now I get that's why the story is for the Christians trying to get into that, into the secular punishment.
Yeah. But I integrate both ways of marketing into what I do, but the main thing I want to do is come off as authentic. I don't want to be fake or anything, which is why marketing is a struggle for me, because it's like, how do I, be showy and be advertising if, that thing scares me, and I don't want to push people into doing this. I want them to do it naturally. So that's more of the angle that I go for most of the time, is hopefully my art is good enough. Hopefully my caption is good enough that it'll intrigue people.
Yeah, that's an uphill battle, huh?
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I always like to do is, for the people that do not know, can you give like a quick little summary of your past works, or the works that people can find currently right now? And you also said that you've already working on book 2 of your new series. So what is this book 1? Is it available now? Can people find it? Or are you holding off to it until you have a little bit more of book 2 under wraps?
I am self-published on Amazon. That's where the majority of my books are. This current book is not published yet. It definitely needs a face, it needs a cover, it needs a lot of kind of stuff done to it. But I think it's definitely really close to getting there. So yeah, I'm on Instagram. Definitely all my work is on Amazon, all that stuff.
Definitely. Now, is there anything that you're most proud of? Not necessarily for writing, not a book, not a full work, but maybe a scene, a character, an emotion, something in your writing that you're the most proud of, something that, because we all have our things that we can look back on and be like, you know what, that could have been done better. But
yeah, I think
what can you look back on and be like, okay, now if I just zero in on this, I'm golden?
I think it's hard for me to find something to like be like really put my weight behind and be saying that I'm 100% proud of this. But most every reader that I've had like beta read and like review my work has said that the writing, like the prose itself, is really good. And that can actually, like, I notice that harms me a little bit when I'm writing this next book. I'm like, I got to make sure it's as good as the last one. And that stresses you out a lot. And so I try not to focus on the things that people say they like about my work, because, you know, that puts a lot of pressure on you in the long term. So I'm just trying to do what I enjoy.
God, I felt the same way. I remember the first person that told me that they really like the action sequences in the first book. They were like, "Oh man, you have to top that now in the second book." And I was just looking at them like, "Man, I didn't even necessarily like think of having that many action sequences." And that's just how the first book was plotted. It's not necessarily true for going to be for the second one. And then I just thought that, I was like, man, that is what they talked about with a sequel syndrome. That like it's just like you almost have with like authors that I know that have written like 19, 25, 30 works. They say that their first and their third books were significantly easier to write than their second, just because the second one is their immediate follow-up of your first. The first one is your first time, so it's just you don't know what's going on, but the second one you have a little bit more of an idea, or at least you think you do. So it's like all this like anxiety of not failing the second time, but by the third one you already have two under your belt, so it's like, all right, whatever, it's back to like being normal.
Yes, definitely. That's another part of like putting your work. Instead of having people judge you, it's having people praise you. That gives you fear as well.
So taking all those concepts together, how do you think you plan on continuing not just the series, but like your career as an author? You've gone from genre to genre based on the book, just piqued out your interest of just, and that's to me such a admirable like desire to be wanting to expand your craft in multiple ways. Every human has multiple interests. I'm pretty sure there's no one on the world that just watches one genre of anything. Everyone kind of like flips flops in between things. So from a creative standpoint, I don't think there's anything better than wanting and having desire to go in between genres and kind of expand your horizons a little bit with that. What do you think is even further out there? What do you want to play with in the future?
I'm trying not to think past this trilogy right now. I think I don't plan things out. I just want it to grow organically. So, whatever I'm interested in the future is what I'm going to do. And I'm just wanting to work on building a solid foundation to where I can branch out if I desire to in the future. I think that's the most important thing.
Wow. So kind of going back of what we were talking about before, is there anything that you can look back on that you definitely think you can improve on? Something you look back on as like, yeah, I definitely need to be able to work a little bit better on, my dialogue, my pacing, action sequences. Is there anything that you can look back on as something that you want to make sure you keep on improving on?
I like to make sure that I'm like always kind of improving and doing the best that I can, but I can't pinpoint something specifically that, I think I need to work on, or that someone has told me that I need to work on. But there's a lot of little technical things that get me, like capitalization of like nouns and things that like is consistency throughout grammar structures. Because, it's easy to overlook that when you're like, oh, you're in the heat of the moment, you're in the story, you're in the zone. And then, you get caught with like, oh, there's not supposed to be a period there. And then like that happens 50 more times throughout the whole document. And you're like, oh, I got to go back and fix all these.
No, yeah, the struggles of editing. That's the worst part, is that the exchanging of hands, right? Where you go through your editing and you feel like you're pretty confident in it, and then you turn it over to an editor and you feel way less confident within the first session that they read through your like first like couple chapters. And you're like, oh my God, what have I done? And then you start boiling it down a little bit, and you finally have the end product at the end. Having gone through that process multiple times, how is that feeling from your point of view of going from, a roughed up piece of rock into like a mineral that you can actually turn into a reader's hand and be proud of?
Well, it's not like particularly difficult in my mind. I think it's not fun to do, but yeah, I think I try to take something each time that I've gone through that process, and I try to apply it to during I'm writing. So one thing is, someone told me on Shadow when they were beta reading it, they were like, oh yeah, dialogue doesn't end with a period, it ends with a comma. So I made sure I made a note of that in my head. And I'm like, when I'm writing the first draft of the next book, I'm like, okay, comma, not a period. and it's a lot of taking those little notes and just like making them, at the forefront of your mind while you're writing, as well as the story.
My God. And the thing that I love the most about it too is like the whole artistic side of everything, right? The whole ability of drawing and painting and wanting to see that more visual aspects. You said that you haven't put any of those things within the books. What is stopping you from putting those type of works inside the book?
I definitely say I'm better at writing than I am at art. I love to do art. I love to draw and everything. But, when you look at these professional artists and how they put their work into their books, I don't feel like I'm at that level yet. And I think that might plague me for the rest of my life, no matter how good I get. Um, it's
Look at
definitely,
the Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It's literally a stick figure. Like people just like the style.
yeah, the style. I don't know. I think it's definitely going to be a leap of faith when I do go into it. Whether it pays off or not, we'll see.
I mean, we're authors. We know all about leap of faith. Everything we do is a leap of faith.
Yeah.
No one gets in this for money. So,
Right.
taking that concept together, how do you feel about the current trends in writing right now? We're seeing a huge rise in romance. We're seeing a huge shift into more episodic forms of writing as opposed to full books. Kindle Vella is booming. Things like Wattpad and Inky are bringing in millions and millions of views and, making people overnight successes within their own realm of genres and within their own right. So how do you feel in this new sphere, in this expanding industry?
Yeah, I think that kind of goes to what I said before about my own personal perspective. And you can go into this thinking, I have to learn this, I have to do this, I have to do that, follow these trends, follow these tropes. But I think kind of keeping to my own vision is what's going to help me the most. And I said building that foundation before I can branch out too much. I did want to learn Kindle Vella and get into all that, but one step at a time. I have my own life to deal with at the same time, and yeah, it's just taking it slowly and going into it slowly so that I can be thorough in when I learn about it instead of trying to slap something together so I can be an overnight success. Because that's not going to happen if you don't take your time.
Yeah, amen to that. So I'm still just fascinated on the idea of this new IP basically you have, this new like book idea, right? One thing that I had wished that somebody had told me very in the early of my writing was that if they had an ability to drop their second book right after their first, that they would have done that. So if you get the opportunity, is that something that you would consider doing, where since you're already writing book 2 as book 1 is being edited, do you think you're going to just always be on that line where when you're a little bit more ready with the editing, you're going to be done with the writing of book 2 and you can get the editing of book 2 going as you get the cover design and promotion ready for book 1, and now you're writing book 3, so by the end of it you basically have 3 books ready to go, and you can just drop them within quarters of one another, 3 months, 4 months, 2 months, depending on how it is. And that in itself I think is major promotion status, because it shows like the audience that you're about this, that you're here for the long term. You're not just going to drop a book and then we'll see you in a couple of years. And people just like that serialization type of things. We're in a world right now where binging is the mode. That's the mood. That's what people want to be doing. So if they have the option to just be able to go and knock everything out in their own time frame, I think that is another huge boon.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of benefits to that. And you'd have to be a pretty big author to have these huge releases, and have people expecting you to be releasing it. If you're just kind of like I don't want to say like casual author, but like when you have casual readers, they're not going to be waiting. They might not be waiting for the next book. But at this point, I think it was small enough to where I want to gain like a following that's close enough to me to where, we might have a personal attachment already, so that, they will follow it and they'll be following me so they get updates. If I could, I don't know if I would put the first and second book out at around the same time. It would definitely be an experiment, and I'd have to look into it, research it some more to see exactly what that would do.
Still, it's just like the amount of concepts and what to do. I mean, that's probably why, so many of us do interviews with one another. I think it's because we generally don't know what's going on. So where it's like you're trying, it's like when you're in class and like the teacher's like, giving homework out and everyone's like, oh no, yeah, I understand that. Then you're over here, it's like, so how did you do number two? Oh, so
Right.
that's an exponent. Oh, okay. And like you're just kind of like crowdsourcing information because none of us really know what's going on. These are deep waters.
Except the
Kindle,
class is like 10 different teachers and they're all giving out different homework and they all want your attention at the same time. And you got all these other classes too. It's rough.
yeah, that's it. That's actually a phenomenal point where you don't even know how to navigate the water sometimes. You don't know what people are out there generally being nice and like being like, hey, listen, I learned this. If I can if I can save you some money, some time, that would be awesome. And you don't know the people that are like, all right, well, the writing isn't that good, but if I can make these YouTube videos and just like sell that type of like marketing idea without even really know what I'm doing, then I'm gonna do that.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes different methods work for different people, and
That's true.
you can get caught up in different ways, and it might not, what works for someone else probably might not work for you, and you got to find your own way, which is why I was really thinking about building a stable foundation so that I can like move at my own pace.
Yeah, I mean, especially with even like from genre to genre. If you are a sci-fi author and you have this idea of like, reaching your audience on Wattpad, I'd recommend that you reconsider your situation. Wattpad is dominated by romance. Vice versa, if you're a romance author and you think you're going to get your start on Reddit, I'd recommend that you reconsider your situation and maybe formulate a new plan. Because
People post
again,
their stories to Reddit.
oh yeah, short stories, yeah, there's writing forums.
Short stories, yeah,
and
yeah.
they are brutal because it's not Instagram. It's not like there's somebody trying to help you. It's people coming for next, and they're not bullshitting about anything. They'll trash you and call you a horrible writer over like a misspelled word or just like an overuse of like a comma or things like that. You know how it is. You know how the internet is. It's a crucible. So, have you ever felt any of that pressure? We talked about the beauty of the community. Have you felt any of the negativity? Has anything put you down? And if it has, what have you found a way, or did you find a way in order to overcome that negativity?
The negativity for me, like, it's the flip side of the positivity, whereas like you compare yourself to what everyone else is doing, and of course that's the most common one, is comparison. I'm not in the communities on Reddit because I know like that can get kind of toxic pretty quick. Yeah, so I'm not going there, but definitely comparison, trying to match up to other people puts a lot of pressure. And they're always like, oh yeah, you shouldn't compare, we're trying to uplift ourselves, but at the same time it's like you can't help but do it. And it's just rough.
Yeah. Comparison is the killer of joy, but it's also like the double-edged blade where I feel like it's part of the human experience. Like I don't know how you can live life without having that feeling at least once.
Yeah.
The difference between people is like at like the level of the level that we have it and how you react to it, sure. But I feel like everyone is going to experience that level of emotion at least once in life.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that I really don't want to focus on in terms of like, like being super popular and being great at marketing and all that. It's like I want to more focus on me for the time being. That's kind of my core right now, so I can keep my sanity. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Words, honestly, to live by. One thing that I have been kind of asking people is there anything in TV right now? Because kind of going back to what we talked about, that like not only is the industry changing, but like the whole thing about morally great characters, I'll be like the audience is changing as well, and what people want to read. I feel like if Harry Potter were to come out now, it would not be as popular as it was when it first came out. Because like Harry Potter's very much the idea of clearly good, clearly bad, and the world in between. But now I feel it's changing. People are falling in love with the villains more than ever. Thanos did nothing wrong was a legitimate tweet for a while. So like we're just seeing this idea really morph. How do you feel like that as an audience, actually? As a reader, as a person that's watching TV, you have shows like Loki that are literally centered around solely a morally great character. You have a whole bunch of new source material, new TV shows coming out that revolve around characters like that. How do you feel in this new era?
Well, I'm not really into like a lot of the Marvel kind of stuff, but recently I did watch a show. I don't know if you've heard of it, called Arcane on Netflix. It's
It
animated
follows
based on.
the League of Legends.
Yes, League of Legends. It's really good. You should watch it.
Okay.
But I had no knowledge of it going into it. But the first part of the story, I don't want to spoil it, but it's like two sisters, and they're both kind of innocent. They're making their way through this world. They've had injustices done to them, but then you realize that there's a surprise. Like one of them, you know, it isn't. It turns out poorly for them, and they go down this spiral. And that shocked me because I knew nothing about it. And it's like sympathetic, and there are characters in it that are sympathetic to them as well, and like you want to stick with them as much as you can. And I think that's a lot of the villain sympathetic kind of trend that we're in right now. And I think, I mean, I enjoy it, but a lot of times like the villains are popular because they're hot, I guess, or because just people like they're witty and are quirky or whatever. Because people like villains in stories, but they hate them in real life. And I think if we were actually writing villains, we wouldn't appreciate them in fiction as much as we do.
Now that's interesting. Do you think this new shift, and do you think like, the content that you're not only reading about, but like the content that you're watching, do you think that has shifted your writing of villains and heroes?
Uh, Definitely, because I started writing kind of when this trend was rising with Game of Thrones. Everyone was like, "Oh, it's gray." No one knows who's like really wrong or who's really right. And I think my being in that kind of fandom influenced me a lot. And that's kind of what I'm carrying with me right now. Just evolving that in my own mind of, these characters, George R. Martin said, and I kind of live by this in terms of making characters. It's like, if you know who's good and who's bad, you're not writing characters, you're writing cardboard. Like action figures, smashing them together. So my thing is I want to make sure they're people first, not villains, not heroes. They're people with goals, and I want to flesh them out in that way.
Wow. So taking all these ideas, everything that we talked about throughout the episode, how are you building the characters in your book? Can you give us anything, who the main character is? Can you give us anything without getting too deep into spoilers?
Yeah, well, there are three main characters. One of them I mentioned before, so I'll skip over that a little bit now. The other one is a child. They don't know their age. They think they're 12 years old because they are a slave in this library. And, I think the main thing I'm focusing on, especially in book 2, is that, they're a child. They can't quite navigate this world that they're in as they are. And they're making like a lot of simple mistakes that would frustrate readers. But, I'm coming from the standpoint of they're just causing chaos because they don't know what to do. They're children. They don't know where to go. And so I don't want to make them like too clever to like anything like that. So in that way, I don't think they're a hero, but they're definitely a protagonist. The other character is a woman from like a different reality who accidentally ended up in the one that she's in now. And she's definitely kind of ruthless. She's my favorite to write because she's clever, she's witty, but she's definitely got a lot of flaws, and she's kind of aware of them, but she ignores them. And it definitely causes her a lot of strife in the story coming up, but she's very important later.
That's really fun. And you said there's a third character, no?
Yeah, I talked about him a little bit before, but he's kind of like this morally gray. My idea for him, I'll say this, it's not too spoilery, but my idea for him was like, what if Jesus was like evil, or not evil, but like had used his abilities to manipulate instead of like uplift? Because like I think of it like, when you're marketing to people or like politicians getting influence, you do all these things to make yourself look good, but you're doing it for these different purposes, or you're using people in a negative way. And that was kind of my inspiration for him originally.
Man, that is fascinating. So what is this title? What can people be looking out for when it finally drops?
The series name is called Omen. The first book is definitely called The Stained Sea. Book 2, I'm going with the title. I'm going to set this in stone now. The book 2 is The Battle of Prophets. Book 3, I don't know yet, but we'll find out.
Man, you heard it here first, folks. The Battle of Prophets, and you already know there's going to be some type of alliteration with the word prophets, people. I mean, oh my God, that's the type of stuff you live for, right? And Stained Sea, TBD for a release date, but watch out for it soon. It's already written. It's just going through the final editing process, which could take some time. You know how it goes, but it will be out when it comes out. It'll be definitely worth the read. I mean, just everything I've heard so far has got me foaming at the mouth, ready to tear into this book, tear into the series. I love religious aspects. I love when people take a real critical look at our own history, how people developed, and then take that in a fictional aspect and just put their own creativity and fantasy spin on top of that. Beautiful. I cannot wait to read more of your work, especially with what you do with supernatural, especially what you've done with the Shadow of Hades, especially what you've done with, man, I always pronounce Ichikan's Widow. What is it?
Isanan's Web.
Isanan's Web. I know it's with an I and a W. I know those are the first two words. Again, you just go ahead and Google Paul Williams. You look up the Amazon author page. Everything will be there. All the links for Instagram are going to be right below. We have reached the end of the podcast. I always can talk more and more and more with this man. Everything we talked about. Such a philosophical talk every time we get together. I love it. Paul, do you have any final words for the people? Anything else that you want to say? Any websites? Anything that you want to get the people interacted with? Just as a promo for you, the man does do paid book reviews, and from what I've heard, they are phenomenal. I've had personal conversation with people, and they boast about the work extremely. Make sure if you're interested in that type of service, look him up. You can message him directly on Instagram or a website or anything he's about to drop us right now. But make sure to not only look at his writing, but his art. And, make some comments, drop some likes, make him feel nice so we can get some of that work in the book next time, right? Come on, what are we doing? And then also make sure to follow him up on the services that he provides. They are very well worth the price. So, Paul, final thoughts.
Yeah, definitely see me on Instagram. I'm definitely trying to expand into like a better website, so that's something place you can find me at. And in the future, definitely I'll have tons more links and tons more things to get into in this segment, but for right now I'm building, and that's all that I need to do.
Exactly. That is the best thing about this artistic process. It's just the true zen-like place that you get to the cigar, right? There's no more expectations. It's going to come when it comes, and when it comes, it shall be great. It takes a long time to get to that level of zen, and you're hearing it from this young talent already. So I'm telling you, this is a career to watch out for. We have reached the end of the podcast. Paul, thank you again for coming on. This has been AR's Tales, aka the ART podcast. I've been AR. This has been Paul. All links that you need are going to be in the description. It's going to be in the banners. Make sure to follow, do everything you got to do. Check on us next week when we have a new episode, and you already know what to expect. Check with us soon, and peace out.